They say beware of meeting your idols. They'll disappoint you. But my guest today, Dominique Sachse, is the exception to that rule. I had the privilege of meeting her in person when I was a guest on her podcast, Over 50 and Flourishing. And let me tell you, she is even more beautiful and kind in person. I know you're going to love her as much as I do. Dominique is an Emmy-winning journalist, best-selling author, and empowering voice for women. With nearly 3 decades as a beloved news anchor in her hometown of Houston, she built a reputation for authenticity and connection. Since stepping away from television, she's built a digital empire focused on beauty, lifestyle, and personal growth, with nearly 4 million followers. Her best-selling book, Life Makeover, Embrace the Bold, Beautiful, and Blessed You, is not only one of my personal favorites, but is packed full with inspiration and practical advice to create a fulfilling life at any age. Today, as we kick off our monthly motivation for the new year, Dominique is going to show us how to face life's challenges with grace, resilience, and faith. Get ready to thrive in 2025, ladies. This is going to be a conversation you don't want to miss.
Are you a strong, independent woman who's passionate about her career? Then this podcast is perfect for you. Based on her book, The Career Woman's Secret Playbook, career coach Dr. Dawn Hamby shares the kind of insider secrets you can only know if you've hired, fired, and promoted employees over the past 30 years.
Ladies, I'm on a mission to help busy women just like you create a career and life you love without sacrificing your work-life balance to get it. Come join me as we inspire and motivate each other only as women can and have lots of fun along the way.
With Dr. Dawn's tools, strategies, and action steps, you can unleash your personal and professional power in a whole new way. Here's today's episode.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Career Woman's Secret Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Dawn, and as you already know from my intro, I am thrilled to bring you a very special guest today as part of our monthly motivation series. Now, if you've been listening for a while, then you know this series is all about shining a light on women who epitomize the idea of women helping other women, and these are also women making a real difference in other women's lives. This episode is actually going to be airing on January 6th because I knew that our January theme to thrive in 2025 would be the perfect backdrop for this conversation, as today's guest embodies resilience, faith, and empowerment. And of course, these are qualities that will inspire and energize us all as we step into the new year. I can't wait for you to hear her insights and wisdom today as we talk about how to step into that new year with confidence, courage, and clarity. Ladies, please join me in welcoming the incredibly kind to small podcasters and YouTubers like me, Dominique Sachse. Hi, Dominique.
Hello, Dawn. It is so good to see you again. And it's such an honor to be on your show this time around. So thank you for having me. And can I just say, I am digging this Thrive in 25 business. I love it. I love how you're starting the year and what your mission statement is. And I am on board.
Yeah. Yay. Well, thank you for that. I am honored for you to be here. And yes, who doesn't want to thrive in 2025? I did not coin the term. One of my best girlfriends did, but she's letting me use it for this podcast, you guys.
Well, that's nice of her. That's a good girlfriend right there.
Isn't that a good girlfriend? Yes,
Yes.
yes. Okay, so as I had mentioned in the intro, Dominique, I talked about the fact that to me, your show, all the shows that you do, the content you have out there in the world really is about lifting women up, lifting ourselves up, finding that beauty from the inside out, all of these amazing things. And it occurred to me that a lot has changed just within this past year. So, as you know, Dominique, I had the honor of being on your podcast about a
Mhm.
year ago, and oh my gosh, so many things have changed. So, with that in mind, as we step into this new year, how do you personally define thriving in the face of change since you've been through so many changes this year?
Yeah, sometimes I think the face of change is what makes us thrive. So it sometimes takes the change in order to propel us in a direction where we're being called to go. And are we willing to step into it? Are we willing to step into that calling? And it can be scary, as you very well know, changes, whether they are personal, professional, whether it's loss. I know you lost your mother not
Yeah.
long ago. And that is an unwanted change, but it's still something we have to walk through. And do we choose to go through these doors or open these doors with grace, with a sense of curiosity, with a sense of, okay, maybe this is happening in my life because I'm being sharpened and I'm
Mhm.
being shaped and I'm being called to step up and level up in certain ways. So I see it all as an opportunity. I figure, as you know, we have seasons of peaks and valleys, and there are times when we're climbing, and then there are times when we're summiting, and then there are times we're sort of in the flatlands. And I understand that there's a need and a reason for all of it, and not to shy away from it, not to try to change it, not to try to say, oh, I'm frustrated with this peak. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I need a little bit of a valley. Maybe I've got to summit that peak. Maybe there's something that I need to see and experience. And so I think it's our outlook,
Mhm.
because change is inevitable. It's going to happen to us whether we choose it or it chooses us, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And in fact, when I think about all the changes you mentioned right there, the ups and the downs, right? Those peaks and the
Mhm.
valleys. What do you believe, Dominique, in terms of, and for I'm going to say this obviously in the intro, I do mention this in the intro, but when I think about all the changes you've been through this year, a lot of it
Mhm.
wonderful changes, like starting a new opportunity there in the Dallas Fort Worth area, but it also
Mhm.
meant that you had to leave your beloved home of Houston. But then at
Right.
the same time, you found love again. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So this beautiful woman is now a newlywed, you guys. But when
Yes.
you think about the pluses and the minuses,
Mhm.
what would you say would be the biggest lesson you've learned from having the attitude you do about embracing change instead of letting it scare you so much?
Mm. Yeah, I see the growth hindsight. Once we have some distance and separation from all that turmoil, and that dust kind of settles
Mhm.
from picking up our bootstraps and moving forward with choices and decisions. And so I feel like in the moment, you're kind of in a dust storm, and you're like, okay, God, give me clarity in the dust. And at some point the dust is going to settle, you're going to settle, and you're going to have this opportunity to sit and reflect on what it is that you've chosen and the change and how it feels. And it doesn't mean that every change is going to feel great all the time. I mean, there could be some wonderful things that come with change, and there can be some losses that come with change, right? But I always say, what are you giving up versus what are you getting? And a full sacrifice, or a compromise sacrifice, is if you're giving up more and getting less. For me to move forward, I feel like I've got to be giving up less to be getting more, and that can be sized up in many different ways. A lot of that is spiritual growth, personal growth, relational growth. But I would say for me, some of the more interesting things, because to your point, I left my home that
Mhm.
had been my home since 1974. So when you
Mhm.
talk about being rooted somewhere and a place being the fabric of who you are, I mean, I could really say that was Houston for me. And many felt that I was a part of the Houston fabric just because of the nature of what I did, because I was on
Right.
television for as many years as I was. Letting go of that. But it's interesting because I don't know if I would have let go of it had these opportunities not presented, had this career opportunity not presented, had the fact that my boyfriend at the time not lived up here. Would I have entertained it? Would it have been the right time for me? I don't know, but I have to look at all of the things that were happening and were
Mhm.
in play at the time. And I am just of the belief that these things are divinely inspired. There is no random happenstance that takes place in our lives. There is God moving in our lives. And do we surrender to the moving? Do we surrender our control? And I would say that's probably the biggest lesson in all of these things that I've learned is that I am not in control of my destiny. In fact, God is. And am I going to surrender to it? And am I going to listen and discern and then move forward in that walk? And where am I being called to go? And what is it that I'm being called to do? So I think, to answer your question, it's the letting go of that belief that we have control over everything
Mhm.
and then to surrender to it. And then what's the lesson in it? And the other thing about change that I really want to address, and this is something that I said to myself over and over, and that is just because I'm choosing to leave my hometown of 74 years since 1974. I'm not that old. But just because
Ooh,
I'm choosing to
but you
leave my
looked
home.
beautiful before.
Well,
I'm
thank
like,
you.
what?
That's a whole other interview right there. But it doesn't mean that it's leaving me, right? I may be moving from it, but it is still very much a part of me. And had none of this worked out in the way that I had hoped, materialized, or whatever, or let's say that gravitational pull back there was more important or significant than I felt, Houston's always there. These things are always there. You can always try something and then say, okay, I tried, not for me. I think I felt more satisfied, more connected where I came from. And that's okay. That's a fine decision to make. But sometimes we've got to stretch and get a little bit uncomfortable. And so that's always my word of encouragement in anything that I talk about, whether it's a beauty tutorial, whether it's hair, whether it's makeup, it's life, it's opportunity, it's relationship. If you're being called into something, try it. Because the worst thing is that what if, right? What if I did it?
Right.
What if? But I don't know, and
Right.
you don't want to live with regrets and what ifs.
Exactly. And when you do, it just colors everything else. It just weighs you down, doesn't it? I
It
know,
sure does.
the audience probably already knows if they've been following you for a while that you talk a lot about bold risk taking, which
Yeah.
always resonated with me. In fact, when I had the honor to be on her podcast, one of the things we discovered is how much we really had in common, our
Mhm.
timing especially. And that ties to a story I wanted to share with the audience about when my mom passed away and how Dominique's story kind of inspired our own and how we were facing
Mhm.
that loss. But one of the things we both realized is we both have been with our companies for 28 plus years. We both
Mhm.
decided to step away. We both started a podcast and books and we're on YouTube and things like that. Now, of course, one of the things that Dominique mentioned just a minute ago was, again, not wanting to live with those regrets, right? And even though the change sometimes is scary and nobody wants to deal with loss. I
Mhm.
love, Dominique, that you stress all the time that there are things we can control, but there's so much we cannot. And
Right.
then really vice versa. For example, I find that when I talk to people about, being in charge of your own destiny, you can't be in charge of everything. You can be in charge of some things, like
Hmm.
going to the doctor, getting a health checkup, or
Yes.
taking care of yourself and setting those healthy boundaries, right, Dominique? But don't you find that people, when you talk
Hmm.
about that you are not really in control of everything, I always say, and this has been around for a little while, the idea that we're in control of the effort, but not
Hmm.
the outcome. And that's
Correct.
okay, because if the outcome is something we didn't expect, yes, sometimes it's not a great outcome, but other times it's going to teach us maybe more than we would have learned otherwise. So you had mentioned a minute ago about not being in control.
Mm.
Dominique, I am a recovering control freak,
We have that in
but
common.
we know we have that in common. I came up with a phrase I thought sounded a little kinder, and I'm going to use it in 2025. So I'm calling myself a control enthusiast instead of a control freak. I just think that's more empowering. Okay.
Sure.
But but I too had to realize I needed to let go of the outcome. So what do
Hmm.
you say to folks when we talk about that, the universe or God, whatever your belief system is, really is in control. You just need to let go of that and concentrate on the effort. And then people get so upset about that sometimes. Like, what do you mean I'm not in control of my own destiny? But I think it has a negative connotation and it doesn't really need to. It's not like we're sitting around not doing anything, not doing our part. So
Hmm.
how would you make that distinction between doing our part and then also realizing it's okay to let go of that control?
Yeah, well, it's better than okay to let go. Think about how freeing it is to let
Mm-hmm.
go. Think
Mm-hmm.
about the yoke. Think about the burden that you are dropping. If you think that you're in control of securing a job, securing a financial future, securing this in your relationship, securing, mental health for your child, you know, how can we as humans secure all of these things for ourselves? And if we think that we are seriously in control of all of that, then we have a conflated sense of self, number one, and we also have an overbearing sense of burden. So my mindset is I believe in God.
Mm-hmm.
He is in control of the outcomes, like you say.
Yeah.
We are responsible for our part. We are responsible of being good stewards of what's been given to us. We are responsible for handling our blessings, for giving gratitude for the things that we have and that we have been gifted, for developing and sharpening ourselves, for, refusing to succumb to every wish and desire, to rein in all of these wants and these wayward thoughts that can lead us astray. It's discipline. We are responsible for self-discipline and
Right.
self-control, but we do not have control over the destiny. And I think when you release that, and look, it's not to say that if opportunity comes your way and presents, to sit there in prayer and say, dear Lord, I really, I hope this pans out. I could see this for my future, or, this is something I would really love. But here's the thing, if it doesn't materialize, there's a reason for it.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't blame yourself. You certainly can't blame God, and you will understand what that reason is within time, perspective, and distance from that. So I think it's a very freeing mindset because it forces you to be present, not forward thinking all the time. It's like, now, what can I do now to be my best self? What can I do now to honor myself, to honor my family, to honor my commitments that I've made? What can I do now in the struggles, in the things that aren't comfortable and I don't necessarily like? How can I do it in good cheer and with good attitude? How can I be an example to other people, to my children, with my behavior, to be a thermostat setter in a room? There are so many different ways
Right.
that we can be our absolute best in the moment. And I personally believe that when you do all of those things and you give blessings for what is, even, and I will say this, to give gratitude for the difficulty, give
Mm-hmm.
thanks for the tough times, because if you can find the blessing in the tough times, then you are way more likely to be rewarded with the good times.
Yeah.
And
Oh,
that's just how I believe those things work.
yes.
I've seen
Beautifully
it in my
put.
life. I've
You
seen it
have.
in my life.
Right. Right.
Yes.
Yeah. You're not talking philosophy, research. You're talking about time tested strategies that have worked for you and have, not only given you that inspiration and
Mhm.
resilience to get through, but your audience, thank goodness. You guys, Dominique has a following of up to 4 million if you were to look at all of her platforms. And I think someone like her who's in the world of putting out such beautiful content to inspire and uplift people, it's so wonderful to have platforms like that where
Mhm.
she can share those pearls of wisdom, because that's really why I'm so excited she's here. Is I believe her messaging and her content, if you're not following, you will after this interview, and it really can help you get through those times. And she mentioned the tough times, right? And that's what I
Mhm.
love about her content is, yeah, she talks about all the fun things too. You got to embrace that. But the message there, I hope everybody heard, was how freeing it is to let go of that and to appreciate every minute we have and to really live
Mhm.
in the present. What is that saying, Dominique, about, the past is history, the present is
Yesterday
a
is history,
mystery, right?
tomorrow's a
Or the
mystery,
tomorrow is the
today's
mystery,
the
right? That's
present,
why they
but
call
why they
it
call
the
it the gift
present.
or whatever.
There's a reason everybody
Yeah.
knows that quote, and
Yeah.
even though I may have mastered it, but I mean, there is a reason everybody is familiar with that, because
Hmm.
when we say the present, we really mean not just being in the here and now, but also the gift it actually is. So
Yes.
I mentioned that, Dominique's story, especially when she talked about her own personal loss with her mom, really helped me as well. I'm I had already had the chance to meet Dominique in person by then, but my mom passed away on January 11th. I was in the middle of all things, Dominique. Can you believe this? I was in the middle of doing a live stream for
Mm.
the new year because I always offer a new year to a new you challenge. And I do this live stream in the evenings, the first full week of January every year. This will be our 5th year to do it this year. And it's always that first full week when everybody's back at work because most
Sure.
of us come back, maybe January 2nd, 3rd, you go to work, but then the next week. So I was in the middle of filming day 2 of the 5-day challenge when I got a call from my dad. In my case, my mom had suffered a debilitating stroke and at the same time got diagnosed with Alzheimer's.
Mm.
So she had a 5-year battle. So when Dominique talks about, finding the blessing, man, it sure is hard to find a blessing when you lose your mom.
Yes.
And Dominique, I hope you don't mind me sharing that our stories there are very different. If you've watched her videos, her mom
Mm.
was taken suddenly.
Yeah.
I sometimes our family, when you're the caregiver, we've gone back and forth, Dominique, and struggled thinking, man, would it have been better for her to go quickly? Was it better to have her for 5 more years? But the quality of her life was so hard for her and for us. And of course, for her especially. So I don't know what's easier, to be honest. I really don't know if it's sudden. You don't get a chance maybe to say all the things you want to say. But if it's lingering, oh, that has its own pain. So for us, I was inspired by one of her videos, again, trying to find the lesson in the pain. And one of the things we have clinged on to this year, because this will be our first holiday season without her. But we think about, for any of you touched by Alzheimer's and strokes,
Mm.
we think about the fact that she, she's not suffering anymore.
Right.
So even though sometimes you can get mad at the universe,
Mm.
why God could you not have helped her get better? Why couldn't that have been our Christmas miracle? Those things. Listen, I watch enough cheesy Hallmark movies to have wanted that to be the case. But when I think about a disease like that unfortunately does not have a cure, then I can step into the positivity there and realize, what? She's not suffering. She's waiting for us. She's beautiful and
Mm.
healthy. And I've had some amazing things happen to me this year for my business. And my mom was always so business oriented. She was a business owner herself. So I promise you, Dominique, I definitely
Mm.
believe in the power of God, the universe, guardian angels, you name it. And I know she is my guardian angel because some of the
Mhm.
deals I've gotten recently, I just think she is kind of up there taking care of me and all of us kids like she would have if she was here. So having that in common, Dominique, where we both have lost moms, and I think the loss of a mom or a dad may be a little different than a loss of a friend or even a divorce or a husband. Losing a parent, I think, has its own unique
Yeah.
sense of loss, right? What advice, Dominique, can you give? Because I know your story about a celebration of life.
Mm.
I shared with Dominique before this broadcast that I played your video to my dad, who's 81, and it just uplifted him. He never thought about doing a celebration of life. And then we also waited 2 months. We didn't do it right away because my mom chose to be cremated.
Mhm.
That gave us time to heal a little
Yeah.
bit. And so by the time it came around, we had her favorite cocktail, we had her favorite food, and all that inspiration came from one of your videos. So your mom,
Mm.
Audrey, lives on in the fact that she was our inspiration and my dad loved it. So what else could you share with maybe someone who is either suffering from that loss or maybe facing this in 2025 so they don't forget to
Mm.
still thrive in spite of the pain?
Yeah, well, Audrey was a trendsetter. That is for certain. She, to her, funerals were morbid.
Mhm.
She hated them. She
Yep,
never
my mom
wanted to
too.
attend.
Yep.
Hated it, hated it, hated it. So
Yeah.
her, like you, my mother wanted to be cremated. We had never talked about end of life. My mother, as you know, just from watching her on my videos, was
Yeah.
so full of life, so
Yes.
vibrant,
Yes.
so she seemed ageless to me. And it's
Hmm.
like the reality was, I mean, she was 87 when she passed. And I still think she had like another 10 plus years in her. I was convinced. I mean, she just had that sort of vitality. So
Yeah.
we never really had those discussions
Mhm.
about end of life. I think because I knew her so well, the choices that I made were spot on for her. But I will also say this, especially it was just the two of us. My father had passed. Both my parents were only children, and I'm an only child, which means no aunts, uncles, or cousins. You talk about the smallest family, and my son's an only child, so the trend continues. But it makes for a very, very small family. It also means that when a parent is aging, the burden falls on the only child to care. But I will say this, when there are siblings involved, it doesn't even matter if it's just one-on-one or siblings, but these conversations, first of all, need to be had about end of life care because we don't know what's coming our way. We don't know, is a parent going to suffer a stroke? My mother had a massive, cardiac event that left her in a vegetative state for 5 days until she passed. I mean, we don't know these things. And so having the conversations and planning, I know it sounds morbid, but it's really not because
Right.
it can prevent so much turmoil and
Mhm.
strife within the family unit when there's a plan. And especially when the wishes, if you can have these conversations when your parents are lucid and able-minded to have these conversations and these talks, how wonderful to have everybody on the same page so that when the time comes, it's simply a matter of executing already preset plans as opposed to infighting and I don't know, and would he or she want this? And I don't want it, but maybe you do you know what I'm saying? It could
Right.
at a time that is so stressful and so mentally exhaustive, you've already laid out the framework of how things should play out. So conversations, I think, number one. Secondly, I love personally the concept of celebration of life. I just
Me
think
too.
it's such a beautiful way to
Mhm.
honor and to pay tribute to the person whose life is no longer there. But it's like you're sad in the moment and you took the time to honor that and process that. But at the same time, you wanted to honor her life,
Right.
her impact, her legacy, her funny moments, her favorite colors, her favorite thing to eat. All of those things get to be brought into this beautiful equation, however you wish to spell that out, however you wish for it to play out, big, small, whatever. I mean, to me, it gave me such warmth and comfort to have everybody there in red and everybody eating chocolate cake and
Yeah,
drinking Prosecco
love
like my mother
that.
would have wanted. I mean, I honestly, Dawn, I felt like
Yeah,
she was
yeah,
there. She was
yes.
celebrated. She was lifted. And to me, there's no other way. That's my way. But then again, these are conversations to
Right.
have as a family unit.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And there are so many great videos, you guys, on Dominique's platform of her and her mom. And if you are the parent of an only child, Dominique and I have that in common, but mine's
Mhm.
a girl. She got to meet Savannah when
Yep.
I was there. There were times, Dominique, when Savannah was driving me a little crazy that I would whip out one of those really sweet interviews you were doing with your mom, and your mom was going on and on about how great you were, and you were going on and on about how great she was. And I would play that for Savannah and say, see right here,
See?
this is, do you see how they appreciate each other?
Hmm.
I only had to do that once or twice, but Dominique's videos could be used for instructional purposes as well, folks. It's true. But yes, I think there's so many wonderful lessons to learn there because we want everyone to thrive in 2025. But the reality is, thriving doesn't always mean the good times, right?
Right.
I've always said it's easy to be great when everything is great. True character and strength to me is how do you handle when things go really awry?
Yeah.
Do you freak out? Do you drive everybody crazy? Are you able to kind of just step aside and just think, okay, I've got this. We can figure this out together, right? And
Yeah.
so, yes, having a celebration of life or facing any loss, and again,
Hmm.
trying to see the blessing behind it and realizing that, especially if we are losing a loved one, which of course we can never really control, we know they're going to want us to be happy and, they want us to move on. So, lesson learned there, guys, that if you face a loss or perhaps in the middle of trying to face that. Just tap into your strength, tap into your faith, surround yourself with people who can lift you up and have wonderful, perhaps, memories of your loved one, or
Mhm.
just be there for you. Even if all it is to, I don't know, watch a Netflix binge and have some popcorn or that glass of wine when you need it, right? Sometimes we just need the person to be there and maybe not have to have everything figured out right away.
hmm Exactly.
Right.
That's exactly right. Grace. That's what it's called. Give
Grace.
yourself grace and space to
Yes.
process and allow yourself to feel, allow yourself to have those quiet moments. And I
Yes.
had ugly cry moments, and they were necessary. They needed to happen. And my tendency is to busy myself in my work or surround
Yes.
myself with things and projects and people and all of that. And I made a conscious effort, Dawn, to really
Hmm.
allow myself to grieve.
Hmm.
And, you know, I needed it.
Yeah.
I needed
Yeah.
that to properly process the loss that I
Yes.
was experiencing. I wouldn't have been doing myself any service.
Right.
I wouldn't have been honoring my mother properly by
Hmm.
motoring through and just pretending like these feelings aren't there, or like, okay, wipe the tears, time to go
Right.
record something. No,
Yeah.
I just needed to sometimes
Hmm.
curl up in a ball and
Hmm.
ugly cry.
Yeah.
And to let people know that not only is that okay, that's normal.
Hmm.
That's healthy. We have to do these things.
Yeah.
We are emotional beings. We are deeply, deeply connected to people.
Hmm.
And especially if you have a great relationship, we were blessed with beautiful relationships. When
Right.
you have that, and that was my last living parent, that's a process. And I
Yeah.
had to honor that. I had to allow it. I had to be okay with it.
Hmm.
And I think, what I also chose to do was express that and bring that on my platform,
You
because
did.
I
Yeah.
needed people to see this is how I'm processing it. And if you feel this way,
Yeah.
it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's okay to have these days. And, that's just a part of the
Yeah.
vulnerability and just honoring um, not only myself, but her, and also honoring the purpose of these platforms is to be vulnerable and to be authentic in how you feel about things.
Well, and I think that's another reason I just absolutely love your platform and feel so honored you're willing to spend this kind of time with us today, Dominique, because especially when you're in the public eye, you guys know from the intro, Dominique's been on television many years. And so when you see someone who's even professionally trained to not only look fabulous on camera, but to have that poise and that grace and that professionalism. I think that in some ways there may even be more of a pressure because you're so used to handling life like that, right? If
Sure.
she has to go in and do the evening news, unless she's willing to walk away from the job that right then and there, back in the day, when she was working for other people, she had to kind of suck it
Mhm.
up, Buttercup, and
I was just going to say that.
right.
You read my mind. I was thinking, suck it up, Buttercup.
Right, exactly. And you know what? There are times when we have to do that. In my
Yes.
family, because I feel I'm so blessed to now run my own company, my own business. But for 32 years, I was like you, Dominique, and definitely was working for other people. So
Hmm.
my family motto was the 24-hour rule. So we allowed ourselves 24 hours, at least 24 hours, maybe more like 48 some days, but to just lay in that bed, cry our eyes out. Nobody was to bother you for any reason.
Hmm.
We all chipped in, did each other's chores if that person was having that 24-hour rule, because we knew health wise. I'm from a doctor's family, so not just
Hmm.
actual health, but mental health as well.
Yep.
You got to let it out of your body. It is okay. And that's why I appreciate folks like Dominique that have such a big impact on television and through her platforms to show, hey, there's nothing wrong with looking polished and beautiful. We want you to feel beautiful from the inside out. And why not? That's fabulous. You need to do that. But then
Yep.
there are other days where it's okay to have the ugly cry.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
you might need more than just a day or two or three in bed, and that's okay. So no, I
Yeah.
really appreciated that because she not only talked about it, ladies, but she let us in on those days, and it really just brings people together to see I
Yes,
don't
it
have to be
does.
perfect,
I'm
and
yes, I'm not alone.
oh,
Hmm.
we're not alone. Exactly.
Right.
And You guys know I've talked about this in many episodes that women do suffer in greater numbers. There's all kinds of research behind why, in terms of perfectionism, in terms
Hmm.
of imposter syndrome. So, in my book, of course, I talk a lot about that. And control, we're talking about being a control enthusiast, trying to be a little kinder to myself about that. But we know that women have a certain part of their brain that kind of almost propels us to do that. And it really is a disservice. Now, are there times where after you've cried a couple of days, it's okay to maybe put that in a little box and go clean out that one little part in the refrigerator that's driving you crazy? Because guess what? You're just going to feel like you accomplished something, and that's okay too. Then go
Hmm.
right back and cry it out if you need to. But I think the overall picture and theme here in this part of our interview today is for you to walk away and give yourself permission that if
Hmm.
you face any kind of loss or stress, or, perhaps it's not death at all or anything like that, but it's just a sadness or a bad day, face that and be okay with that, because
Mm.
we're not supposed to be perfect. You talk about that burden of letting go. Dominique, how freeing is it to know we don't have to be
Yeah.
perfect?
Very freeing. And I think also we need to get out of the comparison game as well.
Oh,
And,
yes.
and you had mentioned this, Dawn. It's like you talked about the brain can go there. Well, the what ifs, what if mom maybe had passed quicker and there wasn't all this prolonged suffering? Or what if this or what if that? We can't compare ourselves. We can't compare our losses. We can't compare our grief. We can't compare the way we process these things. Some people may be quicker, some slower. Do you know what I'm saying? We need
Yes.
to honor who
Yes.
we are and what our circumstances are and not feel guilt,
Right.
shame, or oh gosh, I got the short end of the stick. I had to suffer, this and that. Or do
Right.
everybody's story is different, and when you start comparing yourself to others, it is a losing battle. So boundaries again, present again, where you are, what you have. How am I going to process this? How am I going to do it as an individual? How are we going to do it as a unit with our family, to be healthy and to be strong? And the thing is that this is the beauty of sharing, is when we share our stories, we find that there are people out there who have similar stories. So even though my mom passed relatively quickly, yours was more of a prolonged experience.
Right.
I bet as you have shared your story, you've probably connected with other women who have had to deal with these prolonged, Alzheimer's and losing mental faculty. It's so horrible because you
Yeah.
lose your parent as they're alive. So
Right.
you've had to go through that walk, and there are many, many other people who've experienced that. And in that journey and in that sharing, you can find and commiserate with other women and other people who've journeyed like you
Right.
and can offer words of encouragement or just words of, I feel you. I know what that feels like. And there's
Exactly.
peace in that. So
Yeah.
it's not that yours is worse than mine or mine's better than yours, but
No.
we need
No.
to talk about it because we can
Yes.
find people out there with similar stories and similar experiences. And there is comfort in numbers, there is
Mhm.
comfort in sharing. And
Mhm.
even if our stories are different, then, guess what? In the end, we were blessed with awesome moms and we
Exactly.
got to celebrate them in a
Yeah.
beautiful way.
Yeah.
And
We
isn't that
really
good
did.
enough?
It is, it's a beautiful way to connect and realize that you're so privileged to have a mom that inspires you,
Yes.
wants the best for you. All of my girlfriends would always joke because my mom had quite the opinion occasionally, and they would always joke
Hello.
about, oh yeah, yeah, and they would always say, oh yeah, you want Dawn's mom on your side in a fight, right?
Yeah.
Because Dominique, she can mess with us, but nobody else better. One
Mhm.
of those very protective moms. But you're right.
Yes.
And I think women need to let go of that comparison-itis that you talked about.
Mhm.
So in 2025, we don't want to do that, ladies. We want to realize that whatever you're facing, there are those of us that may have a different, path to get there,
Mhm.
but we're not alone in what we face. Now, speaking of that, I want to remind our audience, because I hope we weren't too, I hope that story wasn't too morbid, but I think it's important to realize, as Dominique said, we got the privilege of having wonderful moms. And no matter what life has in store for you, the way you handle 2025 really is that part is up to you, isn't it?
Mhm.
We don't know what's around the corner, but there could be some wonderful things. So I want to talk about some of those wonderful things. And I think Dominique has a very unique perspective of something else that women might initially think of as a loss. And
Mhm.
I didn't think of it that way. And Dominique, you did a recent episode on this where something about that the empty nest to you was not a syndrome. Could you
Mhm.
talk a little bit about that for any women who may be facing the empty nest and going, oh my gosh, what am I going to
Yeah.
do now? I'm so stressed out about this.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. It was a social media post. I just called it the 7 midlife myths, right? And one of them is, empty nesting is not a syndrome. It is a natural part and process of life. And as parents, I believe that if we feel like we've done our part, right? That we want to see our children fly. We want to see them spread their wings. We want to see independence. It's unhealthy to keep in, to overprotect, to not let them go out of fear. And it's usually fear that's the great inhibitor of both parent releasing child and child also doing risk taking. And when I say risk taking, I don't mean in the negative way that we think of children doing risk taking, but I mean, embarking in some new things, taking on a new school project, going out and getting that first job by themselves without mom or dad having to set it up for them, going out and going after the smart, pretty girl and not settling, going and joining a church group. There are great examples of positive risk taking that our children need to do. And we need to say, go, you figure out how to do that.
Right.
And if it happens for you, great. And if you fall on your face, well, you know what? There's a lesson in that too. That's how we were raised. That's how I
Mhm.
was raised. There was no, you know, being shuttled after school from one place to the next and then mom arranging this and dad. No, I had to get every job I had on my own. I've worked since I'm 13. I've loved every minute of it. I've made bad boy choices. I made good boy choices. I learned from both. I mean, it is what it is. But I think that the beauty is watching your child adult, letting them adult. And so being an empty nester to me is now I get to step back and I get to say, okay, child, use those wings. Those
Mhm.
wings have been building and you've been building feathers and that wingspan has been
Oh,
getting wider.
love that.
Go fly. Go
Hmm.
fly. The nest is here. You can fly home, but think about how often. And I'm also not going to sit there and say, "Oh, please come back to the nest. Mommy misses the little nest."
Right.
No, I am always here. Home base is always safe wherever home base is. And if you need it, it's always here. My love for you is ever present and it's always with you wherever you are.
Mhm.
But go live your life. And to me, having that mindset erases the syndrome. It erases this loneliness. We have to be very careful of not tying up our identity
Mhm.
in our
Mhm.
children. Our children
Right.
are phenomenal
That's it. Yeah.
parts of us. They are our
Yes.
offspring, but they are
Mhm.
not us. They are not our identity.
Mhm.
So it's very freeing and it's very important, I believe, for women in midlife, because that is the age and stage when our children do leave the house and grow. We have to have our own purpose and passion going on.
Mhm.
We have to have other things that bring us joy, other things that we are invested in, other things that we're curating and cultivating besides just raising our children. Parenting obviously still continues past 18. They're still going to come to you for
Right.
advice
Of
and for
course.
wisdom and,
Mhm.
helping set up bank accounts or doing transfers or, making car payments or asking about investments or whatnot. You're still parenting. It's in a different level and a different way, but don't see it as a syndrome. Don't see it as something negative, because if it
Mhm.
has a negative connotation, you're not going to be your best at it and they're not going to be their best at it. See it as the great opportunity that it is. You have raised a child who's now adulting. Let them adult and let them fail.
Boy, isn't that the truth? The letting them fail.
Yes,
We do not do them a service. You guys,
at all.
many of you know I'm a retired educator by trade.
Hmm.
And I'm telling you, some of the
Yep.
worst success,
Hmm.
in other words, not a success story, were those helicopter parents.
Hmm.
They would not allow their children to fail. And what are we doing to prepare them for that real world ahead, right?
Correct.
So that's such great advice. Thank you for sharing that, Dominique, because,
Mm,
we talk about this all the time on this platform. And I know you certainly do because her podcast, as you guys, many of you may already know, Over 50 and Flourishing, that is sort of the theme, isn't it? To
mhm.
really think about your life in midlife and realize this is a wonderful opportunity to reinvent yourself, to kind of
Yes.
recharge your batteries and realize you've got a whole other half of your life to live. And
Yeah.
I find when I turned 50, I found it a lot less scary, crazy, I know, than when I turned 40. 40
Hmm.
to me sounded, what? Wait a minute. And 50, by the time I turned 50, and now I'm 58,
Hmm.
so 2 years from 60, but I find that I am not scared like I used to be. I have so many lessons that if I could have talked to 28-year-old Dawn versus 58-year-old Dawn, life is easier if you let it be. It
Yes.
really is. The confidence, you're more comfortable. I know, Dominique, we've talked about hormonal reasons why sometimes you just let it rip and say how
Yep.
you really feel, but you talk about freeing. It really is. I think you know
Hmm.
yourself more as a woman in your 50s than you ever did. Oprah, I believe everything Oprah always said. The 50s were her favorite decade.
Hmm.
So I think it's just the beginning and it's
Yes.
just going to continue to get better from there. So thank you for sharing that because I know a lot of women do get their whole identity tied up with being a mom. I love being a mom.
Hmm.
I find it to be such a gift, but
Yep.
I worked hard, like Dominique, to understand that if my daughter spread her wings, and she certainly did in the Air Force, it's
Hmm.
my proudest moment to know that, yes, home base is here when she needs it, but
Yep.
you know what? I'm so proud that you can now be married and have this wonderful life on your own. And home is always here if you need that home base. So
Yeah.
thank you for that. Okay,
Sure.
something else amazing I definitely want to talk about is finding love in midlife.
Mm.
Oh my
Yep.
gosh, Dominique, I literally let out like a woo when I saw your post because you know what, ladies, some of us have been through it. We sure have.
Yeah.
We've been through divorces. We've been through, perhaps just not finding the love of your life or just a lot of change or transition,
Hmm.
those kinds of things. So you might think you're too old for love. Listen, you are never too old for love. You're never too old for romance and passion
Mm.
in your life. And yes, yes, I hate to tell you, ladies, you just get with the program here. Don't give up on love
Yeah.
just because maybe you've suffered a broken heart or maybe don't believe in it at this age. So, Dominique, do you mind sharing how you met
Mm.
your adorable? And he's just, I'm already following his podcast. You guys, if you want inspiration, follow his
Oh,
podcast. Not his podcast. I'm sorry, his YouTube channel. He has these daily devotionals. I am obsessed. So
aren't they great?
oh my goodness. I just love it so much. Y'all, he's with his coffee cup. I walk around in my bathrobe and coffee cup and I've barely started the day. He's already got a devotional he's ready to share. I love it so much. So please share the story of how you met your wonderful husband. And I think it's going to be such an inspiration for all of us.
Well, it just goes to show you never know who God has lined up for you and
Yeah,
when he has that person lined up for you. So my husband is actually a longtime friend, somebody that I've known from back in my radio days. When I started my career, I was actually a disc jockey for about 2 years.
that's right.
And
That's
during that
right.
time, I worked at an adult contemporary radio station, Mix 96.5 in Houston. We played the 70s, 80s, and 90s. And I would, oh my gosh, did weekend DJing, then overnights from midnight to 5:30, then late night. And it's basically how I started as a broadcaster, aside from doing some traffic reporting prior to that. But when I was at the radio station, Vic was he is. I mean, he's a voice actor. He's a musician, singer, songwriter, composer. So he was doing a lot of parody songs, jingles, things like that for commercials. So the station would book him on occasion to come in and do some jingles or to be a part of the morning show and do a parody skit or whatever. So, I mean, I would see him like every couple of months, like,
Yeah.
hey, Nick, how are you? Hey, Dominique, how are you? I mean, there was always like this fun little flirtation thing happening in the hallways, but really nothing more than that. I mean,
Mhm.
we're talking early 20s for me. So I don't know. I could have been dating somebody. I don't know. But at any rate, I just remembered him as this really sweet, funny, fun, adorable human who would show up every couple of months. We went out to lunch one time. I had left the radio station. I'd gotten hired at Channel 2 in Houston to start doing traffic for the morning show. And he wanted to take me out to lunch as a celebration. So I'm like, sure. So we go out to lunch. I don't remember where we went. I remember we had a really kind of deep, in-depth conversation, but I felt like I was journeying and heading this way. And his voice acting
Mhm.
career was taking off and it was leading him this way. So for whatever reason, after lunch, I mean, that was kind of it. We sort of chartered different courses and on we went. But I will tell you this, ever since then, he would check it. He moved out to LA for quite a few years and had been working out there. And then he eventually moved back to Texas. He got married. I got married. Life happened, all of that.
Right.
But anytime he would come to town for work, he would get booked at conventions and things like that. He would always send me a text. Hey, it's your longtime friend, Vic, just checking in to see how you're doing. I'm like, hey, doing great. I've got a son. This is happening, blah, 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 blah. And it was just this cute little text exchange. Never saw each other.
Mhm.
And this was random. This would be like every couple of years, whatever. Anyway, fast forward to now summer of last year.
Mhm.
And it was August. So it was literally 3.5 weeks after my mother had passed away.
Mm.
And he came to town. He was booked for Anime Matsuri in Houston. And he texted me, hey, long lost friend Vic here. How are you? I'm in
Yeah.
town.
Yeah.
There's this convention. They would love for you to be a guest judge for the karaoke contest. I'm one of the judges. It'd be a great opportunity to see you. If you're available, just let me know. So I texted him back and I said, normally it would be a yes. I said, but I just lost my mom about 3.5 weeks ago and I'm not in that headspace. And,
Mm.
please extend
Right.
my regrets and all of that. And so there were a couple of things that struck me. He texted back immediately. He says, oh my God, can I pray for you? Is there
Oh,
anything I can do for you?
right.
I'm so sorry to hear. I understand completely. If you just need an old friend, if you just need a shoulder to cry on, I'm
Mm.
here for the weekend. Would love to see you, but no pressure, respect your time. So I kind of sat on that.
Mhm.
And I had been, we talked about the ugly cry and all of that. I've been doing a lot of ugly crying
Of
and I've been
course.
holed up in
Of
my
course.
apartment for a really long time.
Of course.
It was just the process that I needed to go through. And I sat there and I kept looking at that text and I kept thinking about it. And I thought,
Mhm.
and I kept hearing my mother's voice. Like you said, you could
Yeah.
hear your mother in her spirit just moving you and bringing
Mhm.
things to you, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I kept hearing this voice like, honey, get out of this apartment, get up, put on your makeup, go out, go see your longtime friend, go, stop crying over me. So I texted him back and I said, all right, how about like 5 o'clock on a Sunday? Can we meet here? Blah, blah, blah. He replied, absolutely great. We meet at a restaurant in Houston. And when with an old friend, it's kind of like time stands still. You
Yeah.
immediately go
Really
back to
does.
that place
Yeah.
of intersection and you talk about all those memories and those people and everything. And then you start filling in the gaps between then and now. And we had discovered as we were filling in those gaps, there was so much that we had in common in terms of career, highs, lows, pitfalls, um, our faith and the role that that plays in our lives. We just found that there was so much connection and there was so much laughter and levity and lightheartedness on top of it. And I was like, wow, my old friend Vic is a really cool guy. I just had this epiphany. And so we left the restaurant. And now, mind you, he lived in the Dallas Fort Worth area. I'm in
Mhm.
Houston.
Mhm.
So he said, I had such a great time connecting with you. And he gave me a hug and he said, is there any way I could see you again? And I said, sure. And that started this long distance back and forth. First, lots of calling, lots of texting.
Right.
He would fly and see me every
Oh,
couple of weeks. Then I
yeah.
would fly up here. And anyway, I mean, long story short, he was put in my life at the craziest time, the least expected time. I almost said no. Moral of the
Right.
story, don't say no.
Right.
Say yes to things that are put in front of you, even if it seems weird and awkward and you're kind of scratching your head like, why is this happening now? Because, this is odd.
Yeah.
Um, And all of that happened. And it's interesting because we had been dating for a bit and we got to that point in our relationship. We were like, really starting to miss each other when we were apart.
Yes,
And my
yes.
roots were firmly planted in Houston, as you well know.
Hmm.
Roots were firmly planted up here. And it's like nobody wanted to budge, but we, didn't want to talk about the elephant in the room. Like, okay, what's going to happen if we actually want to be together? And that's when the career opportunity for me to move up here and to join the network and,
Right.
to kind of embark in all of that presented. And I was like, okay, I mean, okay, are you going to make it that easy for us? Okay. So that's what precipitated the move up here. And, and it's so funny because even though I no longer work for that television network and I'm,
Hmm.
back to spending full-time attention and focus on content that I produce, I wouldn't have had it any other way.
Yeah.
I couldn't have written the script this way. I mean, it's so divine and it's so
Mhm.
incredible and it's such joy in my life and I love it up here
Yeah.
and I have such a sense of peace up here and I just, I'm kind of blown away by the way everything happens. So that's my wild and amazing love story from my long lost friend from the past, who's just the love of my life and the sweetest human. And so to let everybody know about his daily victories. It's so funny because we were talking and we always have these conversations and we do devotionals and we read together and all of that. And then we kind of analyze it and we talk about it. Well, what do you
Yeah.
think about that? Well,
Yeah.
what do you think about it? And I always love his interpretation of scripture. And his grandfather was a pastor who
Oh.
who ran a church in Greensburg, Pennsylvania. And and I said to him, I said, you ought to do these on social media, these
Hmm.
daily words of wisdom or whatever. And I like call it daily victory, whatever. It's got your name in it.
Of course,
And
you were the one that came up with that. Oh my gosh, you're so
I mean,
creative. I
this is
love it.
my lane. I mean, it's, he's like, what? Do what? And I just say, you should do it. You should do it. I really
Yes,
think that you will
it's
inspire
great.
people.
Yeah,
And so that's how all of that started.
I
And
love
I'm so
that.
grateful that he ran with
Yeah,
it. Yeah.
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 Oh,
Because
because the first
it's
time
his
I saw
jam.
that, the name caught my attention, Dominique. It really did with the VIC, all caps,
Yeah.
victory. I loved it. Oh, that's
That's
wonderful.
so
I
good.
love
So good. So
that. Is
yeah,
so
that's our
good.
love story and we're sticking with it.
Well, that's right. Well, one thing that I think there's so many great things about that story. I love that story so much. But the fact, like you said, you knew you just weren't in that headspace. And so
Correct.
you and I were talking earlier about being responsible for the effort and then
Hmm.
letting go of that outcome. But the truth is, had you not gone,
Hmm.
maybe you could have reconnected some other time, but
Sure.
maybe not. The
But
fact
maybe
that
not.
you always talk about taking those bold moves, being
Yeah.
willing to kind of bet on yourself. I always say betting on yourself is never wrong.
Hmm.
And you were willing to do that. You were willing to put that makeup back on and get out of the apartment for just a little bit and then look at the blessing you got by
Yep.
doing your part. So I
Exactly.
think that's so inspiring. I mean, ladies, seriously, like here's someone who she knew back in her 20s, never in a million years thinking you would reconnect and that
Right.
life would bring you together. Because my husband and I met online. We are a
Mhm.
Match.com success story. And before him, I would torture the men in my life. They would have to date me forever before I ever even considered even
Mm.
marrying them, sort of
Yep.
thing. And we dated 6 months. I met him when I was
Yep.
48. My daughter introduced us basically because she's the one who got me online,
I
picked out
love
his
it.
profile. Love that. And you've
Love
met
that
my
even
daughter.
more.
She's a badass, right? She's in the Air
Hmm.
Force. But she kind of convinced me, hey mom, we need to think about that. But had I not taken the brave step of online dating, which kind of freaked me out, kind of scared me
Hmm.
a little bit, but um I was willing to do that. And we never knew that the other person lived just 12 miles apart. Mark always corrects me and says it was 12.2 miles. You're right. 12.2 miles apart. Never had met, we weren't in the same industry. And we never would have met, didn't have
Amazing.
mutual friends or anything like that. So, exactly. And I think about the fact that, unlike other relationships, within 6 months, Dominique, he proposed
Hmm.
on Christmas Day. And I'm like, 6
Wow.
months. I mean, my
Yep.
family fell in love with him, I think
Immediately.
almost as before I did. So I mean, ladies, if you don't learn the lesson that
Mhm.
your whole life could change in just a couple of months, your life could change with
Yes.
one decision, like Dominique.
One move. That's
It's
right.
not
One
one
move.
move.
Hmm.
One move led her there. And Dominique, you'll love the song that we decided to play at our wedding. So again, we were engaged in 6 months, and then I wanted a couple months to plan a different wedding because I've been
Hmm.
married before. So I wanted to be in a beautiful chapel. We're both very spiritual, so we still wanted that religious element. But it's in
Yes.
the middle of a beautiful garden in Hot Springs, Arkansas. And people from all around the country come to get married here. And this was definitely a God thing too. Mom was still with us. She hadn't suffered yet from the stroke. But when I called, because yours truly, when I got engaged, we went back to work. I think it was January 2nd or 3rd. I called the minute, I think like maybe December 28th or something. I wasn't even back at work yet. There was already a 1 year waiting list to get into that chapel.
Wow.
Well, on the phone, all of a sudden the lady goes, "Oh, hang on, Dawn, let me put you on hold." A bride had canceled
Hmm.
for June 11th. June 11th. Now remember, I got engaged in December, so that coming June 11th was my parents' 50th wedding anniversary. I called mom immediately. I said, "Should I do this? But this is your 50th." She said, "Sweetheart, you guys already planned. We had done a huge party for my parents when they turned 70. Everybody had come in for that, Dominique. All the family and friends. We had people flown in from New York, Puerto Rico, you name it. So they
Wow.
weren't planning on doing anything other than having a nice dinner with all of us kids and the grandkids and all that. So that was their plan, was to get together with all of us. She said, "Dawn." Oh, she always said my name so cute. "Dawn, Dawn, darling, Dawn. She was like, if you could get married on our 50th wedding anniversary, the only thing I will say is from that moment onward, we have to celebrate our anniversaries together." And we did. So
Oh,
her June 11th opened up. But again, I never would have thought before I put my profile, put myself out there, took that bold move, took the bold risk, that
mm,
within 6 months I would meet the love of my life, much less get married on my parents' 50th
50th,
wedding anniversary.
which also happens to be my birthday. So yet another connection we have.
Y'all, if you watch us on YouTube, you can see me like literally my head's exploding, my brain gone. That is amazing.
Wild.
I
Wild.
love that so much. Oh my
I
God.
love that for you. What an
Oh,
incredible
yes.
story.
It's
I mean,
incredible.
you
It
can't
really
write this stuff. You couldn't design this any
no.
better. Could you? No.
Dominique knows I'm a sucker for the Hallmark Channel and all those cheesy movies. And
Yeah.
even if I watch that on a Hallmark movie, I
I feel
don't
like
even
I'm
think that
living
was
it.
too cheesy for that.
Yes. That's incredible.
Oh my gosh. I love that
Oh,
so
but
much.
you know what? How inspiring. And maybe there is some woman listening today who just needed to hear this, who just needed to hear, here are a couple of ladies. I mean, you're 58, I'm 57. Here are a
Yeah.
couple of ladies in midlife, and we're like bursting. We're
Yes.
bursting with amazement that we can't believe these things have come our way
Yeah.
because we just said yes, and we've got ourselves out of our comfort zones. And you
We
got
did.
yourself on Match. You're probably like, I am never getting on Match.com. I don't
Oh,
care what anybody says. You put yourself
absolutely.
out there. I said yes at the weirdest and worst time. And here we are.
Yes. Here we are. There are times, Dominique, where I feel so young at heart. This is what I love about
Yes.
being in your 50s is I feel like we have our health, we have our vitality, but then we
Hmm.
have so much life experience that it's like the perfect decade
Yeah.
because you have all this life experience you can now add to everything that may be stressing you out. And yet you still have that energy and that faith and that resilience and that love of life to experience it all. And I think, ladies, those of you listening today, I really want you to get this message. The joy, if you're watching us on YouTube, you're going to see us doing a lot of smiling because we're just so happy to think about the blessings in life, but also what life has ahead. I always say a bend in the road is not the end of the road.
Hmm.
And There are times where, yeah, life can be tough. We talked about that today, but look at all the love and adventure that could be right around the corner if you just have that faith, right? Dominique, as we begin to wrap up, I definitely wanted to mention adventure. Another
Mm.
thing I love about Dominique, and ladies, you might not think about that. You're just
Mhm.
focusing again on maybe that empty nest, which we now know is not a syndrome.
It's not a
And you're
syndrome.
thinking about all these
Mhm.
losses. You're like, I'll never find love again. Oh, my children are no longer here. I have all of this. Work is driving me crazy. Well, that's why you need to call Dr. Dawn. I'll help you with that part. But I mean, seriously, you guys, there's so much adventure. And Dominique has started an exciting new thing where she is actually traveling with her followers to, I'm not just talking like down the street, people, she just got back from Greece.
Yep.
This coming year, right, Dominique, you guys are going
Yes.
to Bali and Ireland.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. And
Yes.
so tell the audience a little bit about that because I think that's inspiring. You have women who maybe have never traveled out of the
Hmm.
country,
Correct.
right?
Correct. We had a few of them who never had. So
Yeah.
this was their first European vacation with complete strangers. Talk about taking a bold risk. They did. And I'll tell you what, I had a vision of what I hoped all of this would look like, right? We have those ideals, but you just don't know until you go, right? And we
Yes.
we planned the trip, and there's a company called Trova Trip that basically pairs a content creator with their audience. And you can do these curated trips depending on your type of content. So let's say if I were a fitness instructor and that
Mhm.
was my lane, I would probably do a curated trip to maybe Costa Rica, and we would do hiking and biking and yoga classes and all of that. Well, my audience is primarily 45, 50 plus, and they're into travel and culture, food, wine, taking in
Mhm.
the sights, having quality time together. So we were able to curate a trip around that. We decided Greece would be our first one, surveyed the audience, see where they wanted to go. Greece, Italy, France kind of ranked up top. So we picked the best trip to accommodate everybody. And I'll tell you what, 24 women from all over the States, two from Canada, one from Puerto Rico, and one from Berlin came. And it was the most extraordinary week I have ever seen of women not knowing each other, not knowing what to expect, immediately coming together, unified under this vision of I bet on myself. I took a
Right.
risk and I did something for me without knowing the outcome, right? We're back to what we started talking about in the beginning. I don't know the outcome, but I'm going to roll the dice on me today. They did. They signed up for the trip. They so deeply connected. These women are so rooted in friendship and solidarity. In fact, we just had 2 days ago a Greece Girls Zoom Christmas party, and we
Oh,
were
I
all on
love
Zoom,
that.
and we were all just
Reese
kind of
girls.
Grease Girls, as we call
I love
ourselves.
it.
And we were just talking about, how life has been, and they're already planning a reunion trip for next year. I mean,
Oh,
that's
wow.
how tight this group became. It's incredible. So I'm like, y'all let me know where you're doing this, and I'm popping in. I'm coming. I want to be a
I,
part of it.
I
So they're
love
doing
that.
it. It's going to probably follow the Bali trip. But yes, it became such an incredible experience and so rich and fruitful for women to basically strip down and get down to who am I as a woman at this age
Mhm.
and stage of my life? What's my baggage? What's my pain? What's my progress? What's my passion? And let's talk about it. Let's share that. Let's join in that. Let's feel safe in it and let's trust in it. And man, Dawn, it was above and beyond. I mean, Greece is beautiful. You think that's beautiful? What I saw happen between these 24 women,
Yes.
that's beautiful.
Absolutely. And who says you can't make wonderful women friends in
Yes.
midlife, right? Isn't there just such a almost like a misnomer that as long, as
Mhm.
soon as you're out of school, it's as if people believe they can't make new friendships
Yeah.
later in adulthood.
Not
And that's
true.
not true.
You
But
you make better quality friendships
you really
if
do.
you're willing to be real.
If you're willing to be authentic, that's right, and take that chance of doing something different. Like
Mhm.
you mentioned, you had a couple ladies who had never traveled internationally, and the fact that they were willing to do that with
Yeah.
strangers. And they knew what
Amazing.
united them, though,
Mhm.
was this was going to be a group, obviously, of like minded women. So, ladies listening, if you don't get a chance to participate in one of Dominique's trips, there could be other organizations with like
Mhm.
minded, professional, fabulous women just like you right there in your community. So 2025 needs to be you thinking about, how do I make some new friends? How do I
Mhm.
surround myself with this incredible circle of support that we know only other women can really give us, right? It's a type of
Yeah.
friendship that you really can't get anywhere else. It's okay. In that way, I think you can have it all. You can't have it all in every aspect of your life, but you can have a fabulous new love like Dominique's amazing, adorable husband, but you can also surround yourself with
Yes.
amazing friends. It
Yes.
doesn't have to be one or the other.
Mhm. It shouldn't be. You
No,
shouldn't pick one over the other because then there are unhealthy boundaries there.
right,
Then you're allowing one to encroach on another, and they shouldn't. Your spouse, your partner should be supportive of your rich
right.
friends, and your friends should also be supportive of your spouse. I mean, that has to be reciprocated, and there must be space allowed for both.
Yes,
But it can be far more beautiful and more exciting and surprising at this stage in life.
yes,
I think to your point, Dawn, that when you kind of reach the 50s, you're over the facade, you are over
yes.
pretending, you
Hmm.
you just speak truth.
Yeah,
You just speak truth. And, here it is. This is who I am. These are my thoughts. And it doesn't mean that we're callous in how we speak it. I think if anything, we become and we should become more considerate in how we articulate our feelings, considerate
yes,
of how it's going to land, but at the same time, be truthful. And
yeah.
when you are that way, wow, you just open yourself up to such richness in relationship. And I don't know about you, but I find the older I get, the less stuff I want. I just want less stuff, less, get rid of it. And I just want fewer but more just rich quality people in my life to have
Yes,
experiences,
yes.
to travel, to have moments, to have just, conversation that
Hmm.
means something. That's the
Right.
stuff that matters. The rest of it, meh. You can take
That's
it.
right. Next.
Done. Done.
You are so right about that, Dominique. Absolutely. Well, Dominique, it's been an absolute pleasure. I think you guys can tell I could talk to this fabulous woman for hours and hours and hours, but I definitely want to be respectful of her time. So, as we wrap up, of course, big, big thanks for being here. I think your words of inspiration and motivation are just really inspiring because, again, you're someone who really epitomizes not just that resilience and not being so scared of change and what life
Mhm.
has to offer, but you've got real life experience in what can help people, whether it's faith, whether it's belief in yourself, well, whether it's belief that there's goodness out there, and
Mhm.
make those new friends, try those new job opportunities, all those kinds of things. So I really appreciate it. I know our audience is going to just gain so much
Mhm.
from you. Now, as we wrap up, let us know. Of course, I'm going to give a lot of info that they would have heard in the intro because, guys, if you go back to the intro, your question is probably, when does she sleep? How does she accomplish everything she does? She
Now I
tours with
actually
the
do sleep.
podcast. She actually has episodes about how you better be taking care of yourself, ladies, and get that sleep. So
Yes,
you might think she doesn't, but she does.
I
But
do.
where can our audience find you? Of course, the book is, I think, a
Mhm.
great way to start with Life
Thank you.
Makeover, best-selling book to find out all of her strategies and more. But where's the best place for them to find you? And of course, you guys, I'll put all the links in the show notes on the podcast and also in the description box on YouTube.
Oh, thank you for doing that, Dawn. That's so kind
Absolutely.
of you. I mean, look, I'm all over social media like you. So my YouTube channel is my name, Dominique Sachse TV. I'm on Instagram at Dominique Sachse, Facebook at Dominique Sachse, TikTok, all the platforms. I've got a newsletter. You can sign up for that through my website, which is dominiquesachse.tv. So yeah, I'm everywhere on social, and I just, my goal and my purpose is just to lift, encourage, and inspire you to live your best life, to be curious about your life, to try new things. We talk about risk taking, and I always emphasize bold risk taking, but there's a difference between that and being careless in our risk taking. This is calculated, bold risk taking, but it's digging in your feet, and it's determining that you're worth it. You're worth the chance, you're worth the risk, you're worth the try. And as we talked about earlier, releasing the
Mm-hmm.
the
Yeah.
thought and the notion
Yeah.
that you are controlling the outcome of all of
Right.
it. We don't know what's at the end of the road, but get on the road. Get on the
Yeah.
road, get on the path, enjoy the journey because man, it's a great ride.
It sure is. It's a great adventure. Who wants to know the answers? We wouldn't have that sense of adventure
You
without it.
might not get on the road if you did, right?
Exactly. Well, again, Dominique, thank you so much. I really believe that because of your interview today, all of our listeners are definitely going to be more than prepared to thrive in 2025. Now, ladies, if you've been listening for a while, then you know I'm going to wrap up with our motto here on the podcast, which reminds us all to unlock our professional and personal power. And it goes like this. If you're not having a fantastic day, don't forget you've got the power to make it one. Ladies, keep striving, keep thriving, and let's make a commitment today to make 2025 our best year yet. Dominique, any parting words as we sign off today?
Oh, I just want to thank you, Dawn. How nice and sweet of you to ask me to be with you to launch your platform and thriving in 2025. I'm honored and blessed. Love the whole June 11th connection. That's great. One of my best takeaways from this podcast. Just thank you, and thank you to your audience for receiving this information. And I hope that they have a beautiful, blessed, incredible 2025. That's my wish for them.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dominique. And thank you, ladies, for tuning in. We will see you next time right here on the Career Woman Secret Playbook podcast. I know our episode is over, but this is just the beginning. If you're ready to take action but don't know where to start, just head over to drdawnshoptalk.com for lots of free resources, ways to work together, and for even more. Subscribe to the Dr. Dawn Shop Talk YouTube channel. Remember, ladies, you don't have to take this journey alone. I've got you covered. Till next time.